Welcome back to IT Mythbusters. We're on episode number 10 today, and I'm excited to be back with Suresh here. We're going to talk today about an interesting topic. We're going to talk about the technology shift syndrome. Is technology shift syndrome a good thing, or is it a major problem? So, Suresh, great to see you again. Always enjoy our conversations. Can you start off by explaining to our audience what the technology shift syndrome is?
Right. I think it's a very passionate topic for me because we all have grown as technologists, Mike, and we have seen from the time of 1990s to what we are in 2022s, the technology has changed so dramatically, right? We have moved from monolithic applications to microservices to containers, legacy applications to new devices, everything being controlled in a manner, and new programming languages. When I grew up, I knew C, C++, and Fortran. I don't know whether it still exists anymore, but we are moving towards Python beyond just Java and things like that. So the question is, are we running to catch up with the latest technology? Is there a merit to make the change? Or are we just falling a trap of fear of missing out, Mike? And I seem to think that people have the fear of missing out, and that's why they want to jump into new technologies and avenues. I'm not sure whether they require everybody to shift that.
Now, this is a great question, and having been in the emerging technology space and the innovation space for a while, this is something I've seen a lot, right? I think for me, new and emerging technologies are great. They offer, in many cases, wonderful new capabilities. They offer new what's possibles, as I like to say, that we might never have been able to do before leveraging technology. And when we can explore and leverage those new what possibles, we can create great new business capability for our business. We can move our business forward in exciting and amazing new ways. And I think that's awesome, right? That's the value of emerging technology. But I think what we see in organizations is that many times we just go ahead and put the new technology in place, but we never actually get rid of the old technology. Right. And so what we see over time is that our IT landscape as a whole just gets more and more and more complex. Right. And part of the challenge, right, is that the older the technology, the more likely it is to be brittle, to fail more frequently, to have issues with performance. And most importantly, the more likely it is to be susceptible to cybersecurity attacks, to have holes in the technology that can be leveraged to gain access to our data. And so as we look at our IT landscapes, it's really important to keep those landscapes current, right? So when we bring in that new technology, it's important for us to figure out what we're going to get rid of, what we're going to take out of our landscape, so that we can keep the complexity to a minimum, and so that we can continue to get the value out of the landscape overall.
So if you look at this one, and it's an interesting point that you talked about, I see a lot of my clients looking at the application modernization landscape. So think about which kind of applications would be a lift and shift model, which kind of applications should be refactored, which has to be re-architected, or we just replace them, right? So the question is, wouldn't that be important that as they look at more technology shifts, it's important to parallelly drive this application modernization landscape so that they are not only getting value out of this new technology advancement, but also preventing what I call as value leakage from the earlier legacy systems. And that's like a monster, right? I mean, it's been there for a while and people don't make any changes because it's tough and it doesn't release more faster. And and there's a lot of constraints playing that part. So the question is, are organizations doing the due diligence of also preparing their application modernization landscape as they make that shift? Is that being done well in an order from an architect perspective? You've been an architect to look at the whole horizon of how the IT ecosystem is going to evolve for companies?
Well, I would argue that I don't think that organizations are navigating this well, because it's a really complex problem. And I do believe that it needs to be dealt with at two layers, right? You mentioned application modernization,
right?
But there's also technology modernization,
right?
Or infrastructure modernization. And I think it has to be dealt with at both layers. And I'll actually talk about this in the context of my current company. Some of the folks that are out in the audience know that I work for a company called Expedient. Right. We're a full stack cloud service provider here in the US. And what we talk about with folks is we talk about the idea of not lift and shift, but lift and modernize, right? How do you think about, as you migrate into the cloud, understanding which of your applications do really need to be modernized, refactored into a new cloud modern architecture, leveraging microservices and containers? Which of your applications can really get value out of that? A lot of them will, but not all of them, right? That financial system, that HR system that's been around for 50 years that just doesn't change very frequently, that system may not get a lot of value out of a complete refactoring, right? And that's where you can look to leverage something like an infrastructure modernization, where you migrate into an alternative cloud like Expedient, and you get the value out of moving into the cloud, getting into a cloud operating model, without having to invest necessarily into kind of the full application layer, refactoring and modernization. So it's kind of that infrastructure modernization as well as the application modernization, and understanding when applications truly will get value out of the application level modernization and the change and drive new business transformation, and when they'll get more value out of simply that infrastructure change and getting the right approach to do that. So I think it's important to think about applications on a case-by-case basis as we drive that forward.
Right. And the other part of the problem that I see in most of the COTS, which we call as commercial off-the-shelf products, and this becomes very difficult in your pipelines, because if you look at like the same SAP systems or PeopleSoft or whatever systems, they are commercial off-the-shelf products that we have used it, and they don't go a lot of changes. So when you build your whole ecosystem of pipelines and CI/CD pipelines and delivery, how are they going to handle that? Considering that, are they going to live with what we have as part of those elements? Or are we going to make what Gartner says about bimodal IT? Both of them coexist and then we make a shift? Because that is going to be a huge push towards the commercial off-the-shelf products, because they're not making a lot of changes, and that could slow down in terms of release of products and services. So how do you think your customers are looking at those areas as we look at the topic of technology shift for commercial off-the-shelf?
I think it's a great question. It's a big challenge. Off-the-shelf software and the sometimes the pain that goes into upgrading off-the-shelf software can be pretty complex, and it's why it's one of the reasons why a lot of organizations are moving to software as a service, where software as a service providers actually take that that responsibility on, and they design their applications to enable it to be updated on a much more frequent, much more constant basis. And it takes that load off of your IT team to do that upgrade, to do that application modernization. Instead, the software as a service vendor is doing that for you on a regular, ongoing basis. That's part of the value of the cloud, whether you're talking at the application layer or the infrastructure layer. The idea of kind of having that ongoing currency managed for you on your behalf, rather than you as an IT team having to manage all that yourself, is a big part of the value. And it allows us to focus our efforts on the next new emerging technology and what's possible with that next new technology, rather than focusing on making sure that our infrastructure is current, making sure that our application is current, right? So it allows us to divert our resources and really focus on what's most impactful for our business. But again, I think it comes back to that idea of this technology shift syndrome. Is it really a good thing? Are we trying to chase a shiny ball and try to do too much? Should we slow down? Or should we, in fact, speed up?
Right. So in my opinion, I'm thinking about it all boils down to the question of why, or what is missing today that we need something new, a new shiny tool or a new shiny toy to make that work. So the importance of what is the outcome that we are expecting to happen. And also, let's not discount what has really worked for us, right? It has actually proven you evidences and opportunities to do that. So I think there has to be a level of due diligence, in my opinion, Mike, to see whether you need to make that shift or not. So this is where the whole concept of the product owner, the enterprise architect, to look at, what is really our core strength? Are we a technology company? Are you a cloud-based offering? What is your core strength? What's your go-to strategy? Where do you think your current assets are? And where do you think you are heading into the direction? So it actually needs to be thought holistically, instead of just jumping into the bandwagon and say that, okay, now this is the new technology or emerging one, then we should get hold of it. So I think it would be more primitive if we just jump in every time a new technology, because there's a lot more learning curve and adaptation towards your existing ones to fit into the new things. So it's going to be a difficult proposition if you just jump in without even understanding why are we doing this at the first place. And that's a hard question to answer. And you need to not become emotional, but look at all the different facets to finally look at holistically, does it make the best sense as a company to move forward in that direction?
Yeah, and I think to your point, I think the business outcomes are critically important, really understanding that and being driven by that. To counter that, I would argue that there is a piece where if you're not out there looking at and trying to leverage the latest emerging technologies, there's the potential that you will miss something. Right. You will miss an opportunity to really drive your business forward, and you may put yourself at competitive disadvantage as a result of that. So in this sort of question, I actually would come back with the answer of, I think it depends.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not sure. I don't think we can bust this one.
No, we cannot bust this one because this is the most happening part of the episode, because everybody is trying to find value. And you're absolutely right that there is so much value technology is created today that we could not have done this in the previous past. Now, with that said in mind, I think we need to be a little cautious in how we run through it. So I wouldn't say that you need to run this, it's a marathon, but focus that you need to have that as a more sustainable one. So the point is, it's good to make that shift as you see the logic to do it, but just don't go too fast is what I'm thinking, Mike. To go there, reflect whether you have got the value from the investment that you made today, and then make that gradual thing. And over a period of time, you would never have regrets. So I just want to hope that the technology companies do not have regrets later as they go much faster. That's what I would say.
And I would also add, don't forget to clean up after yourself. That's part of the problem, is that we make the changes and we never go up and clean up after ourselves. And then somebody else has to do it down the road, and it becomes much more difficult, much more challenging. So lots of different elements to this one. Such a fun topic.
Right. So it's not Ed busted. It's really true that organizations are moving towards the technology shift, and it's a right thing to do if you have done all the homework. And I hope that you will continue